so thrilled today to have our guest, Tiffany Bluhm. It's actually the first time that I get to speak to you also, but I've watched your videos, read some of your book, and I'm thrilled that you're here. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Paul. It's such a pleasure.
It's awesome. So I'm just going to read a little bit about you so folks get to know you, and then we'll dive right in. So Tiffany is the author of Pray Tell, She Dreams and Never Alone, and their companion Bible studies. She's a co-host of the podcast Why Thou and speaks at conferences and events around the world. Her work has been featured in World Vision magazine and on the YouVersion Bible app, the Hallmark Channel, and the Jenny McCarthy Show. She leads an engaged audience of 50,000 followers online and is committed to encouraging people of faith to live with conviction, substance, and grace. As a minority immigrant woman with an interracial family, Bloom is passionate about inviting all to the table of faith, equality, justice, and dignity. She lives in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, I got chills already just from reading
Oh
your
gosh.
bio, and like I said, I've read some of your stuff, and I just want to dive in right with that sentence because it's not a sentence that people read or hear very often about your multiracial background, your multiracial family, and this idea of justice and
Yeah,
faith together. So please just tell us more about that.
absolutely. So I'm Indian. I was adopted shy of my second birthday, and I grew up in a very rural white America neighborhood and didn't meet another person of color, Paula, till I was in middle school. And
Yeah.
so really had this isolated experience, and it very much uh, shaped my understanding of God, myself, and other people and where I fit in the world. And especially during those formative years, there was a lot to grieve and a lot to lose because I not only was I taken from my first culture, I found myself just at odds with what I believed people expected of me. And when they looked at me, I wasn't Indian in America. I didn't have the cultural identity or norms at home. And when I was Indian in India, I very much felt like an imposter. So it was really um, this wrestling of who I am, why I'm here. It's a lot, and I know a lot of international adoptees experience that. But it really was satiated in the kingdom. So in my high school years, I found the Lord, and it changed everything. I remember thinking, if this is real, I'll give my whole life to this. Because although I wasn't Indian in India or Indian in America, I was welcome in the kingdom, and I was an equal at the table. So it just gave me this such hunger for who Jesus is. And as I discovered more of his values in his heart, it was evident this really is for everyone. And systemic culture orders people, right? We have this hierarchy of who gets what and who's rewarded for good behavior and how the world works and who gets ahead and who doesn't. And so it just gave me this compassion for those who felt skipped over, those who felt alone, those who felt left on the margins. And then as an adult, my husband and I have adopted. We adopted from Uganda a little guy when he was 2 years old. And so we kind of United Nations thing going on here. But so my husband's he's white. My youngest son is mixed because he is biological. And so we're really trying to build this understanding of what it means to celebrate your first culture and celebrate your kingdom identity. So
Right.
I see faith and justice on the same side of the coin. They're not divorced from one another. And it's interesting in our modern day how people who are passionate about justice, they're kind of seen as that's a pet project or that's divorced from the gospel, and nothing could be further from the truth. We have both this individual invitation to love and follow Jesus and this corporate invitation to do good and contribute to human flourishing. So it's this both and that we find ourselves in, and where I enjoy that tension that I think it demands the best of us. It's both a heart for the whole, the collective care, and entrusting our entire lives to Jesus.
So I'm really interested about what took you from um, becoming, an adoptee and then finding your identity and then your professional path, because I know you also worked in the United Kingdom and then you came back to the US and you've written these books. So I'd love to hear more about that as well.
So
Yeah.
for me, I would say just this deep, abiding understanding of value, and that faith was the reason I felt like I could thrive in the world. It really drove me to really invite others to be treated with dignity and respect. And so, from my vantage point, I saw that that was the most beautiful next step. And I always tell my kids, as I'm dropping them off to school, like, this life is wild and wonderful, and it can take you some crazy, wonderful places. And it doesn't mean it's not hard. I mean, we all take two to the chest sometimes for various reasons, and life is hard and we get sucker punched and it's just is too much. But just this idea that um, our spirituality is not divorced from our humanity, just that enmeshment that I think is welcome and valued and can really move us toward being a whole person. So that's really was the engine behind that. And I moved in the UK and I served with students, at-risk students, high school students who were going through some tough stuff, and was able to build mentoring programs and after school dance programs and fun stuff like that. And then I
That's
worked
amazing.
in some gang communities in the Manchester area, doing community outreach to kids. And then when I returned, I was invited to serve at a local church and really served as an outreach director. So we worked with the AIDS community and single moms and those escaping domestic violence, those in the foster and adoption community. So we were able to really, out of our belief that everyone has inherent value, able to serve people and meet them where they were at. So, and then from that, I kind of always knew I would write. I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. And when I was in college, I worked in an English lab and helped grade other people's papers and different things like that. So it was a natural next step for me
Yeah.
to take it from blogging to writing and seeing that this is a way I could help shape culture and add to the conversation on women and justice.
So that's really, I think, where we have a lot in common because I'm a human rights lawyer by training and do this work specifically to advance the rights of women. And the thing that I was so taken by with your work is you you really don't like hold back. I mean, and I, I'll kind of give a little bit of background. You'll do a much better job, but you are criticizing in places of faith, in the church, in different kind of hierarchical spaces, the fact that women can still be second class citizens. And when I read the first chapter of this upcoming book that's either just came out or coming out, right?
In a few weeks, yeah.
Okay, amazing. So I honestly, Tiffany, I gasped at the first like few sentences because I don't think I've really seen anybody come out so strongly and so unapologetically in their criticism of, again, the church or a hierarchical structure or religion and be part of the faith. And that's really what
Mhm.
I was so moved by. So I'm kind of, I'm giving just like little tantalizing pieces, but I'd love for you to tell us more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. I first just want to say, I am the last person on earth anyone would have thought would have written such a um, critical piece, if you will. And I mean that in a good way. To be able to unpack how and why we subjugate women in places that we work and worship. And so I hear you. I think I was even shocked that I was so bold, but at the same time, we equate a woman's place in the world of being nice. And I love what you said. We are allowed to be unapologetic. This cultural expectation, Western culture, Eastern culture, to fit in and meet the expectations that men have set for you has caused a lot of damage over generations. And I think with the advent of the internet, and honestly, with the advent of the printing press, we really have an opportunity to address these faulty expectations that are hurting and harming women and girls. And we can really move forward in understanding that this cannot stand. And it's not a moment, it really is a movement. So I really feel like that was a beautiful intro because it really speaks to this idea that women must act or behave in such a way already predetermined for them, or they will not ascend to the highest places in their workplace and their religion. And so we've kind of put these caps on women that unless you behave like we tell you to, despite your aptitude or your assets, you will not gain ground.
Yeah.
And so, in my experience, I played by all the rules, Paula. I did exactly what people expected of me. And so, you can imagine my surprise when the policies and laws in place didn't help me. They didn't protect me, and they didn't protect the women that I worked with, that I knew. And so, I was really taken aback by just how faulty the system is, and how we have architected systems to continually allow women to be treated as second,
Yeah.
and we must not let that continue, especially
Okay.
women of color.
Yes. Okay. So there we go. So what happened? What brought you to this point?
Yeah.
If you don't
um,
mind telling us,
yes, yes. So I worked in an entity. I won't be specific about it, but I worked for an
sure.
entity where I was in executive leadership of a large, very, 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 very large, well-known entity where I live. And I discovered misconduct of the very, very worst kind, abuse of power at a woman's expense. And as I came forward, which it took me some time because silence grips us, it can destroy us from the inside out, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Um, I finally did speak up and I found that I was disposable and the men in my world were indispensable.
Wow.
That a man's accolades were held over several women's accusations. So there was a clear imbalance of power at play. And so as I unearthed why I was treated in that way, I discovered the financial, professional, relational, and religious reasons that we continue to silence women, victim blame women, and really allow systems to play a complicit role in treating women poorly, because it's really a 1-2 punch when we find out misconduct, whether it's on CNN or BBC News or wherever we find out misconduct of a Fortune 500 company or the Catholic Church, wherever we find it, we are always asking the question, well, why didn't somebody speak up?
Yeah.
Why didn't somebody tell somebody sooner? How did they get away with it for so long? And in reality, it's not only an abuser of power playing on the dynamics of race and class and gender, physical size. There's so many dynamics at play, but then there's also the complicit system that will also layer on that second heaping lot of shame that really convinces us that we're the problem if we are speaking up, and our values and our loyalty to our convictions, if they play a higher role than our loyalty to an institution, we act as if we're the ones with something wrong. We're the ones who should just get to packing because clearly this is just the way things are.
Right.
Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, she talks about in one of her books that when something is normalized, that becomes the status quo, and nothing could be more true. We have allowed a status quo of women to be second, to treat them as if they are inherently liars, to treat them as if they are inherently not capable of truth telling, honesty, or partnership. This idea that men and women that they'll subjugate one another, or that they must be completely separate. We have to find a happy middle ground here, right? We cannot keep men and women completely separate. We must look at what is partnership, respectable partnership look like.
I mean, I'm just blown away by what you're saying because it's so obvious, but it's not. It's
Right.
not obvious because I think as you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done that too. I've also normalized behavior, accepted the status quo, like shrugged or looked away with for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
I think this summit is called the Empowered Woman Summit, and um, you certainly embody that. And I'm so curious, what happened in your change process, like your awakening, so to speak? How did you find the
Mhm.
courage? Especially, I mean, I have to, you went through a tough time as a kid. It's not like you had it
Yeah.
easy, adopted the challenges in your life. It would have been very easy to just say, well, I'm not the one that's meant to fight this fight. So what happened
Right.
that you knew
Right.
that it was for you to
Yeah,
fight
I
this
what a
fight?
good question, because I think so many of us, when something goes wrong and we didn't have a direct impact or intent on it, we ask ourselves, ethically, do I have a responsibility here? Because 90% of us are the ones watching misconduct, right? You're a human rights lawyer, you get that firsthand. 90% of us are like, this is bad. We know that this is bad, but what is my personal responsibility here? So I think that it took me a minute to see that my proximity to power had to be sacrificed for the ultimate good. And that was difficult. I was the breadwinner of my home at the time. I had a newborn. So there's all those sleepless hormones. I had a
Yeah.
lot going on just when I discovered this misconduct. And I really had to take into account how this was going to affect me, because bystanders, we're the ones who aren't going through the traumatic experience of being subjugated. And so it's our role to lend our strength and lend our voice and lend our responsibility and lend our platform and our honestly, any leverage that we have to advance goodness and justice. So uh with that, don't get me wrong, it was a journey. It really was. I mean, I was tortured. I was waking up with night terrors, just horrible nightmares. It was, I mean, just it was a rough season. I would avoid, honestly, going out in public because I was so afraid I would run into this person who created himself to be this larger than life
Yeah.
existence, which is what
Yeah.
happens with anyone who can talk a talk and they have a predatorial nature, who has narcissistic tendencies. You exist to meet their need, and if you don't, then you're no longer valuable to them, and they can make your life really difficult. And sometimes we play that in our mind, and they become this inflated version of who they really are. And that was very much the case for me. So it took a minute to get my bearings, but again, it was this loyalty to an institution versus loyalty to my convictions, and really understanding that although this was happening, I would not be able to live with myself if I didn't say something. I was responsible for me, and I
Yeah.
had a level of expectation and value that I could not ignore. So I think it was principles, to be quite honest with you, and it was also knowing that this wasn't just because I didn't say something didn't mean it was going to stop, or that he would all of a sudden get better, or that this
Mm.
system wouldn't be complicit in abusive predatory behaviors. More women were going to be hurt, and in reality, several more women than I had any idea had fallen victim to his nature and behavior. So it really was um, a tumultuous time, and one that I would never hope for even my worst enemy to live through. But at the same time, there has been health since then. And that's not always the case in every situation. We know that. It doesn't always go well. There isn't always a happy ending. And even in my situation, this person, once he was removed from leadership, packed up his bags, went down the street, and started a whole new thing. So, I mean, people are going to do what they're going to do. But at the same time, we have to be willing to hold accountability. And
Yeah.
it's not the powerful that hold the line of accountability. It's usually the oppressed and those who are marginalized. They're the one
Mm.
moving that line forward to what's acceptable in society, and what we'll stand for.
But even though he might have started a new church or entity, or any number of individuals go on to start new things, what you said is very important, because as the bystander, you had your strength to give to others, and that was a gift you gave to them. So the victims' lives are forever changed because of your actions. And
That's right. That's right. And I think there's nothing more isolating than feeling silenced or slandered, and obviously I talk a lot about how this plays out in sexist situations, but really the subjugation of women can come from their time, their resources, their professional opportunities, obviously their body, their reputation. There's so many things that can be taken from them. This act of theft, when there's that imbalance of power and abuse of power. And so it's just we love to think of these huge things, right? But it starts so small,
yeah.
and there's so many ways that we can take a step back and be like, what does it look like to create a goodness culture wherever I work or play or worship? What does it look like? What would that embody, and how can men and women work together to make that happen? Because this isn't some feminist manifesto. I think this is a partnership manifesto. This is an encouragement for men and women to work together.
As people of faith, different faiths, but people of faith, it's so often I hear that religion is sexist. Like, there is this kind of concept that in any of the major religions of the
Mhm.
world, really name anyone, there
Agreed.
is a stigma attached that men and women aren't equal. And I know that you're a person of faith and that it's a huge part of you. So how do you reconcile that? How do you
Yeah.
speak to that point?
Absolutely. I think when you look at the time and context of so many of our religions when they were birthed or really got their roots, there was a lot of cultural influence, whether it's Eastern or Western culture. There was a lot of cultural influence into the time. And so I think that is not the picture of what is acceptable, or what is even good, or what is right. I think that is a baseline for realizing here's the beauty. Obviously, there's so many beautiful faiths, but we have to be able to see if this is hurting or harming. If
Mhm.
there is an undue sacrifice that women are paying that is causing undue harm to themselves and to their families and to societies and to communities, then we have to be able to look at that critically and think what doesn't work here, and what does human flourishing look like for everyone of any faith. because my inclinations and my convictions of my faith, I don't believe that the goodness that is representative and baked into the bread of those isn't only for me and people who believe what I believe. I believe that goodness is for everyone. So I
Mm,
think that being able to look at faith and different faiths and see how there was cultural influences. For example, in Christianity, the Greco-Roman influence during the first century really seeped into the early church, and they allowed this belief that women were deformed men, and women were the epitome of evil, and women weren't capable of truth telling. And so that was, through magistrates and through ministers and through all these places, that belief took hold, and it formed laws and policies and marriages and faith centers. And so we see how cultural expectations and cultural beliefs of the time of in different time periods have taken off. And I think, again, I briefly mentioned the time of the printing press, how that ability to massively disseminate information that would continually uphold misogynist beliefs were able to be, given widespread.
hmm.
And so
Right.
then, that, and because when
Yeah.
something's published, it feels true and right and real. And so
Yeah.
that's being read in homes and in workplaces. And that's, again, the law of the day. So then you just move forward into our present day, and we see these, as you witness, human rights atrocities and just imbalance and laws where women are second, and even in America here. It was wild to me that even the term sexual harassment or, misogynistic tendencies in the workplace or sexual assault, those are terms coined in the late 60s, early 70s. That is relatively new vernacular
Yes.
that we're introducing into the English language, where we can actually identify this is wrong. And
Mm.
here's how it affects people. And here's how everyone, not just women, will suffer under the weight of this imbalance.
The book is coming out soon. I'm sure you're very excited. What is your goal with the book? What do you hope happens when people read it, when leadership reads it?
Yeah, I really want us to examine the psychology and the faulty theological beliefs, especially in the um, Christian faith, and really be able to examine why we continually give men a free pass and we award them sympathy undue when a woman is blamed for misconduct. We still believe, rape culture and purity culture uphold these same tenets that believe that a woman deserved it. She must have done something. She shouldn't have dressed like that. She shouldn't have been at that place. She shouldn't have engaged in the activity. She shouldn't have flirted. She shouldn't have stayed late at work. We have all these reasons where she is responsible. So the onus is continually on a woman to escape abuse of power more than it is on a man to behave justly. So my hope for this book is that people would see that we have architected these places and spaces where men are given a free pass, really starting as early as junior high and at, age 13, 14. And in university culture, we turn the other cheek because we don't want to sully the name of a university, and so we don't take it to authorities. We don't take it to the justice system when they abuse their power, and then they take that fraternity culture into adult life, and it really does incredible damage in the workplace, especially. And so, really inviting people to identify, why is it that we award a free pass to men? And because, do they bring in more money? Do we praise their charisma over any semblance of character? And research shows that as men have more access to power, they believe that they're more sexually desirable, attractive, and will seek out sexual misconduct, sexual affairs, not always consensual. So there is this research that we have, and we know that unchecked power leads to corruption. It does, in every society in the world. Unchecked misogyny, unchecked power, and that imbalance can really do a lot of damage. So it's really a call for accountability and a call for how we treat men versus how we treat women when we find out an unpopular truth.
It's so important that these books are coming out, especially in the wake of the Me Too movement. That was a real awakening, but it's good to have a book there and to have the research there. I think it's so crucial. I am sure that you've had pushback. I am sure people that your opinion is not always popular. Am I right?
You are.
So what happens when people push back at you? I mean, how do you work through that?
Yeah, well, I think evidence really is the best comeback to any criticism I've received. I mean, when you think of women who have more access to power and women who have more balanced power with men, safer cities are designed, more protective laws are passed for men, women, and children. The GDP will rise in any country willing to place women in more power, not performatively one woman, but many women. So I think really the proof's in the pudding of what happens when we're willing to address these things. And let's be real, it is costly. It is costly to eventually find out misconduct, payouts to women who've come forward about abuse of power, removing a man, hiring someone new. It sullies the reputation of an organization or a faith,
Yeah.
or a faith nonprofit, whatever the case may be. So it really, it's costly, it's expensive, and history has proven itself time and time again that the subjugation of women is nothing new, and we must address this. It's this critical moment.
And what happens when they say something like, well, Tiffany, don't air our dirty laundry out there. That doesn't look good for the church. That doesn't look good for the faith. That doesn't look good for our community. How
Yes,
do you
that is
get through
probably,
that?
in fact, I would say, Paula, when I was in the thick of going through what I was going through, somebody told me, don't hurt the witness of the church.
Mm,
Don't hurt the testimony. Don't hurt their public reputation. And I was thinking to myself, goodness is greater than reputation. Wholeness is greater than reputation. Respectability and dignity is greater than any one person's or entity's reputation. So when we think of the moral good of the universe, we must look at our personal responsibility to contribute to that over any one person's reputation.
this idea can be applied to every faith, every political party,
Yep.
every culture. I think it is completely timeless and timely. I'm so grateful that you wrote it. I'm grateful you're taking a stand. I know it's not easy, and I really applaud your courage.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It has really been a labor of love, certainly. And I hope it has the impact and the deconstruction, reconstruction of what it can look like to see equitable spaces and places.
Amazing. So, where can folks find the book or more about you?
Yeah, you can find the book wherever you buy books, every
Mhm.
retailer. It's carried all over the world, as well as, of course, it's Kindle if you're a digital reader. And you can find more about me at tiffanybluhm.com, BLUHM. And we have a free summit, actually, we're offering with purchase of the book with leading psychologists and activists and culture commentators and historians on this issue of how and why we have gotten away with this for so long and how we can all speak up.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This is
Oh,
great.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.